Bianca, yay!
Yeah. Let me get my mic in place here. Whoa, so I can juggle. Um, this is my clicker. Okay, I got it now. Greetings, good evening, everyone. I want to begin by thanking Nerd Nite for having me and thanking you all for your attention and willingness to get nerdy with me on something that I'm very, very passionate about. I have friends in the audience, my husband's here, they can all tell you I will talk ad nauseum about this subject. My name is Vianca Baron Stanford. I am a certified personal trainer through the National Academy of Sports Medicine, but that title sort of sounds way too fancy for me, so I think a better fit would be Movement Muse. My work in the fitness realm lies in understanding the holistic nature of the physical body and the mind as it pertains to health, wellness, and movement, and synthesizing those perspectives and talking literally to anybody who wants to talk to me about it. So if you want to reach out to me about any questions after the show, you've got my ear. My own journey in fitness was more of a 2 decades long quest, if you will. A quest on which every time I would get ready to step out onto this road, I'd have my backpack packed up, my boots tied tight, ready to take my first step, and inevitably I would step out on the wrong foot. I would just be overcoming the same obstacles every time and losing my footing. I would try to overhaul too many behaviors at once. I would throw myself into intense workouts, discouraging me when I couldn't keep up. And I would be holding unrealistic expectations about how I would change my body completely with these exercise programs. My understanding of fitness was that it has to be hard, completely transform me, and it has to happen as fast as possible. Where might these perspectives come from? Society. Too often, society promotes exercise and fitness by hooking into short-term motivation, guilt, and shame. Extreme programs tell us, go hard or go home. Pain is weakness leaving the body. And it sort of leaves us feeling guilty if we don't give everything we've got right out of the gate. They might make us think that if we don't achieve complete transformation, then we may as well not even try. Like, what's the point, right? If I can't achieve my bikini body in 3 months, may as well not do anything. These motivational tactics might also convince us that the value of an exercise program is to transform our bodies and achieve intensity in as little time as possible. This type of promotion of fitness isn't anything new. So fitness culture as we know it started gaining traction post-World War II in America. Modernization of the workforce, as well as increasingly sedentary lifestyles, led to a broadening market for these types of programs: body transformation, health, getting as voluptuous as possible in as little time as possible, as well as other products that kind of were a bit dubious and made some pretty fantastical claims. Advertising also went for the jugular back then, as you can see from some of these ads. One of these pictures was actually pulled out of a comic book that came out in 1996. So it's actually pretty recent that we were seeing these types of marketing images about fitness. Sadly, motivational tactics haven't quite changed all that much since then. Though not as outright insulting as their counterparts, the message hidden in the content still echoes the same destructive directives: extreme transformation now or lose. Now, is it working? I I don't think so. And it's a little bit sad. So I think if this type of motivation was working, I think we'd see a higher rate of adherence to exercise and fitness throughout our lifetimes. But these motivational strategies are undoubtedly linked to this staggering statistic. And only 24.2% of adults actually met the recommended guidelines for both strength training and aerobic activity in 2022, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. What if society's dialogue of fitness was based more on creating a long-term and joyful journey in movement? I hope to share some ideas tonight that might help shift your own internal perspectives about exercise and fitness, and about how the science supports this idea. Cultivating fitness as a lifelong practice harnesses the holistic dynamic between the physical body and the mind to allow a safer and more enjoyable journey in movement. In this journey, we can cultivate the practice of meeting ourselves where we are, and if we ever veer off course, just coming back without judgment again and again. Because, let's be real, life is variable. There are a plethora of variables that contribute throughout our lifetimes to our health and well-being. And these are determinants that are ever in flux. So they're ever changing a lot throughout a lot of our lifetimes. That's kind of one of the givens of living, right, is change. Bodies change with age. Our goals might change. Our resources and environment change. Resources like time and money. And I think that if we can build the expectation in that fitness is not a linear journey, that allows us to more easily come back and try again, rather than getting caught up in this cycle of failure, demotivation, and discouragement. Meditation is a very impactful practice that's rooted in ancient Hinduism and other Vedic traditions. But in the modern Western philosophy that we commonly practice in the West today of meditation, what do? You breathe in, you breathe out. Lose focus on the breath. Simply guide your awareness back to the breath. And the same method can be applied to your fitness journey. And if we do learn to see it as more of a journey, then time is on our side. So drop the immediacy and urgency. Focus on the step right in front of you. Like that famous saying goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. If time is on your side, allow yourself the chance to find pleasure in the activity. Try on different types and forms of exercise until you've found one that actually keeps you coming back because of the joy of it. And time might actually be necessary for our bodies, and a very important factor in how we progress throughout our fitness journeys. When it comes to choosing a fitness program or when we get started, it can be tempting to dive in head first into the deep end of the pool. I've done it so many times over the last 20 years, and it doesn't end up always working out for our best interests, especially when we're coming back to or beginning fitness endeavors for the first time. So those programs that tell us that we should go hard or go home, if you ever see that, look at that with a little bit of scrutiny, because they're actually advising you on something that works against your body's physiological processes. Time is necessary for the body's adaptive processes to take effect. So let's take a look at a few adaptations that build up over time to help us mitigate fatigue and also increase our tolerance to exercise. The cardiovascular system. It does a lot of wonderful things for us. I want everyone, if you can, join me in putting your hand over your heart just for a moment and thanking it for what it does for us. It is life-sustaining, And we forget that, it's constantly doing its job. So what we can do to support it, I highly encourage you to do. Other than just keeping us alive, which is pretty important, it also supports many of our body's processes during exercise. So with each pump, it brings oxygenated blood and nutrients to working muscles and tissues, and also clears away metabolic byproducts that build up in our muscles while we exercise. But maybe the most relevant one or most notable one when we're actually, out there trying to do a power walk near the lake or trying to go for our first run is exercise heat acclimation. So this actually helps us to minimize the physiological strain and help the body better sustain whatever activity that we're doing. Muscle contraction actually creates energy as one of those byproducts of energy production. I'm sorry, it creates heat. So that's pretty obvious to everyone who's ever tried to do an exercise program, maybe that got your heart rate up a little bit. You're gonna have some sweating going on, probably feel really overheated, even if it's like a nice 50 degrees outside. Heat as a byproduct is swept away by a lot of these adaptations. So consistent cardiorespiratory exercise elicits these, and they drive the mechanism that actually cools our body down during exercise. Adaptations like increases in total body water, plasma volume expansion, better sustainment and elevation of stroke volume, so maximizing how much blood pumps out of your heart to the rest of your body. Improvement in myocardial efficiency, and that's just like a fancy way of saying improvement in the way the muscle of the heart actually works. And enhanced skin blood flow and sweating responses is probably the most important to this exercise heat acclimation that we can see. The good news, it only takes moderate cardiorespiratory training. So nothing crazy. You could even just be kind of walking at a pace that allows you to speak comfortably with a friend. And that's all you need for this adaptation. So it's pretty cool. Tendon is a fibrous connective tissue that attaches muscle to bone. And it actually allows for the transfer of the strength and force that's created within the muscle to transfer to bone so that movement can occur around a joint. So without tendon, you could be as strong as you wanted, but I'd basically just be a bunch of bones, just a skeleton, really. So tendons are made of mostly collagen. They have some blood vessels and nerves in them, but it's, for the most part, a bunch of collagen bundles that are all sort of braided and kind of in imagine like a guy wire or some suspension bridge or something like that. So that's what tendon kind of looks like or resembles. So chronic moderate resistance training or cardiorespiratory training that has sufficient impact is actually going to increase the total number of collagen fibrils and the diameter of each of these fibrils, as well as the packing density of the fibrils within that tendon structure. So all of this contributes to increased load capacity and tensile strength. But the important thing about tendon is that it responds best to chronic, moderate levels of load over time, rather than loading it with intensity right out of the gate. So if you can take a look at this table here, it shows the different effects of mechanical load on tendon at different intensities. So we have the low intensity one, that's not gonna create as many adaptations, but so I'll focus a little bit more on moderate and high levels of load. So moderate levels of load, as you can see, they're going to improve the tensile strength. You're gonna see more collagen synthesis, which means more of those fibrils in the tendon, and lower levels of adhesions and inflammatory markers. So that second part is a really good thing because you're getting the benefits of the exercise on the tendon, but you're not sort of incurring the side effects of higher loads, which you can see have a detrimental effect on tensile strength and lower the collagen organization that happens in the tendon, while also raising those inflammatory mediators, so creating more adhesions and potentially feeding into the cumulative cycle of injury. So it's clear that tendon load-bearing capacity really benefits from moderate progressive stimulus to avoid those inflammatory responses that are associated with cumulative types of injury. This next slide is gonna bring some flashbacks maybe from like grade school, but the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And if I could like have everyone chant that, that would be like a dream come true for you. It's the powerhouse of the cell. Awesome. That's great. Thank you, y'all. Yeah, so like if you're anything like me, you probably heard that 100 times growing up. But it's true. So it's really cool. I love these little guys. So this little bean, there's a ton of them in our muscle fibers actually. And through metabolic processes of aerobic respiration, the mitochondria in the muscle creates ATP, which is the body's energy currency. ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is a nucleotide that provides energy to drive and support many processes in living cells. So all of our living cells have these mitochondria in them, constantly acting like power plants to power our bodies. So some of the cool things that we use that energy for is the nerve impulse propagation, chemical synthesis, and muscle contraction. So with consistent demand through moderate intensity training, both strength and cardiorespiratory training, the quantity and quality of these mitochondria can actually increase. And that's pretty cool to me, because it really does enable the energy production to rise and meet the level of demand. So imagine that you're trying to jump into one of these like 100 squats a day or 100 push-up a day challenges. You're probably gonna feel really fatigued and wonder, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? But you gotta give your body a little bit of a chance to create those adaptations so that you can actually produce the energy necessary for those muscle contractions that you're asking it to do. So these are just a few of the transformations that our bodies undergo, and it can take up to 6 weeks or more of consistent stimulus for some of them to take place. So you can imagine how it might be ill-advised to jump into some extreme program right out of the gate. To reduce risk of injury and excess levels of fatigue as we move, it's important to give our body sufficient time to progress from lower intensities to higher intensities of exercise. And the principle of progressive overload actually supports this idea. It's kind of a buzzword right now. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of progressive overload in strength training, but it's essentially a fundamental principle of exercise program design in which several variables are sort of modulated depending on the outcome that is desired by the person training. So it can be your repetitions, your frequency, resistance used. You can modulate those variables depending on what outcomes are, what your outcomes are. So it is very goal dependent what you're going to do as far as like frequency and reps and sets. But no matter the goal, I think it's important to mention that optimizing training is all about balancing stress and recovery. And this is a pretty good continuum to kind of show that there is sort of a disadvantage. If you go too hard too soon, you're gonna see detrimental effects on the body. Too little stimulus, and the body won't really undergo very many adaptations. So you kind of could stay, suck a little bit at the lower intensities. But excessive levels can result in fatigue, injury, and also psychological demotivation. So the National Academy of Sports Medicine actually recommends that increases in training variables should be kept within 10% or less each week. And this is for gradual adaptation. So the consistent incremental nature of this, the kind of stair-stepping, allows us to find the minimal effective dose of how intense we actually need to be in our exercise in order to produce the adaptations. That's going to vary from individual to individual as well. So it's a very personal sort of journey in which you can experiment in finding, okay, what's that sweet spot for me? And I want to remind everyone that extreme strain does not necessarily equal effectiveness. So increasing any variable too quickly or too many at once can be detrimental and counterproductive. Yes, the stimulus must continue to be challenging so that you can have a stair step to climb up to, but you don't need to push yourself to the limit right away. Exercise science confirms that a moderate approach to training that progresses slowly over time yields comparable results to the more extreme programs while minimizing injury risk. All right, I'm gonna say the P word. Sorry, guys. It's no secret that posture, or that modern living is hard on our posture and hard on the human movement system, and I'm sure everyone's sick of thinking and considering their posture, but it is pretty important. The ways that we move, or maybe that we don't move throughout our day, have an effect on our posture. And optimal posture allows for the body to be aligned in a manner that decreases stresses on the bodily tissues and joints while seated, standing, and in dynamic movement. So to produce movement about a joint, the groups of muscles have to work together in a synergistic way to enact forces on the joint, but in a balanced way. And this can get kind of a little bit skewed sometimes. But there are muscles that are involved in movement about a joint that, there are muscles involved in a movement about a joint that are considered the synergists, or I'm sorry, the agonist and the antagonist of the movement. So for example, if I'm doing a bicep curl, this muscle here, the biceps brachii, has to receive a signal to contract. At that same exact time, the muscle opposite of it, the triceps, is actually going to receive a signal to relax so that movement can be produced in the way that I desire, which is to lift a 20-pound dumbbell, hopefully, tomorrow. So what happens is if the agonist muscle is in a state of chronic neural excitation, meaning it's receiving that signal from the brain to contract and won't relax, or if the antagonist muscle is in a chronic state of neural inhibition, it won't receive that signal to, vice versa. So essentially, if one of them is receiving the incorrect signal, it won't let the other do its job effectively, thus pulling the joint too far in one direction or the other. And this can cause some movement pattern distortions over time. Because the joint is held in a suboptimal position, it can increase the stresses on the soft tissues around it, as well as the articular structures, so the structures of the joints. So online workouts that often they can showcase exercises at levels that might be inappropriately challenging, or just don't really consider the fact that there might be postural and movement pattern considerations to attend to first for someone beginner or returning to exercise. Look for these elements in a program whenever you're beginning, returning, or even if you're a regular exerciser. So athletes actually come back to this type of training periodically, programmed into their periodization over the span of a year in order to prevent injury or to rehab from injury. So I like to call them the functional foundations. So the first ones here are flexibility and mobility training, which includes self-myofascial techniques, which you may have seen, like foam rolling or trigger point rolling. So this works to address adhesions that might be limiting movement in the fascia or tension in overly active muscles. It can also improve blood flow to recovering muscles. So it's a very good tool for, if you are already an active person looking for the extra edge in your recovery. Stretching is incredibly important, flexibility. So it works to lengthen the overactive muscles and restore full range of motion where maybe, years of sitting might have worked against you like it did with me. Deep core stability training is peak, all right? I am a core whore myself, as you can probably tell from my shirt. I live, breathe, sleep, eat core, especially deep core training. So a lot of times when we think about core training, what comes to mind? Like crunches, right? Crunches, sit-ups, abs. I want six-pack abs, right? So that's all well and good, and I like a good, nice, defined midsection myself. But if you're not really interested in that type of motivation, doesn't really work for you, what I think of is protecting my spine. So deep core training actually focuses on building up a suit of armor around your spine and helping limit the forces that are going through the spine as we move the kinetic chain. So it's incredibly important for reversing and preventing some types of back pain. I'm happy to answer questions about that at the end. Balance is an unsung hero. So this one is one that we kind of don't really think of unless we're engaged in some kind of a balanced sport. Or maybe we're like trying to close the car door with our leg or something while carrying heavy bags. It has its applications in our activities of daily living. But as we grow older, balance becomes an even more important component to training that I feel gets overlooked a lot. So balance training can improve motor function of the muscles in the lower extremity and can actually prevent further chronic ankle sprains for people who have had ankle sprains in the past. And this happens by a mechanism of improving your neuromuscular control and also a lot of cool changes that can happen in the brain and how we perceive our orientation in space. So that one's a little bit nerdier, and it deserves its own talk. Cardiorespiratory training, it's not my favorite. I never used to do it before I learned about just how important it is to our overall health markers. So even as little as 150 minutes per week, which is really just 30 minutes a day of moderate level cardiorespiratory training, like I said, chatting with a friend or maybe like even, jamming to some tunes as you kind of quickly walk, that's enough to bring on a lot of adaptations that improve our health markers, everything from like diabetes to high cholesterol. It's actually one of the highest indicators of mortality, and I know that's kind of like morbid to think about, but that was a very powerful one for me. It's like, okay, I don't want to die. I'm gonna go on a walk every so often, get my heart rate up. But the other benefit that comes from it is just being able to get through the day without levels of excessive fatigue, which I know is a really common complaint. Like I'm in my mid-30s and a lot of people are tired. So cardio can actually help you get through the day with more energy to do your activities of daily living, which I know something we all kind of want. So as we saw earlier, shame, guilt, and all of those really just detrimental things to our mental health, they've all been utilized against us in thousands and thousands of exercise advertising campaigns since the mid-20th century. So inevitably, our internal dialogues, they're gonna be shaped by some of those ideas that they've been perpetuated towards us. It's like this psychic attack, right? Even if we don't consume that kind of media, no commercials, no TV, we're still receiving those messages, right? So what might your own inner voice be saying whenever I'm talking about exercise and fitness? Why is this important? Well, two main factors that are invaluable contributors to exercise adherence actually come to mind. And those are self-efficacy and emotional support. So self-efficacy is a person's belief in their ability to complete a task or achieve a goal, and encompasses our own confidence in ourselves to control our behavior and exert an influence in our environment. This helps us stay motivated in the pursuit of any goal that we might set, so it's pretty critical. Emotional support is also just top importance, especially in my own personal training practice. I try to provide this for my clients because emotional support is going to leave a person feeling good about exercise. So it involves encouragement and positive reinforcement that's provided usually from one individual to another, and includes being caring, empathetic, and showing concern. Now, if our internal dialogues are based in the shame and the guilt and the short-term motivation, how can we expect to improve our self-efficacy or feel supported enough to overcome the obstacles that might present themselves along our fitness journey? The great news is that you don't need to hire a personal trainer for this, because you can be your own compassionate coach through the practice of self-compassion. So self-compassion draws from the writings of Buddhist scholars, and it's a way of living that can help to inoculate us against the effects of shame and guilt in our lives. There are three main components to self-compassion, and I'll leave these up a little bit longer. No matter how many times you hear these ideas, I feel like it's so important just to take them in again and again and sort of have them reinforced in our brain spaces. So there's self-kindness, and that entails being warm and understanding toward ourselves when we suffer, fail, or feel inadequate, which suffering, failing, and feeling inadequate for some people goes hand in hand with their fitness journey. Rather than ignoring our pain or self-flagellating with self-criticism, we can instead offer ourselves a gentle and kind presence. We can offer ourselves that emotional support, right? Common humanity. So that's really important, because the definition of being human, I feel like, is that you're mortal, vulnerable, and probably most importantly, imperfect. We're not perfect, we don't claim to be. We all slip up and make mistakes. But what common humanity does is it fosters our sense of connection in those moments rather than isolation, so that we can feel more connected to others in times of failure, or maybe when, we just didn't live up to the standard. And third, but mostly my favorite one, I guess, that I love to practice every day is mindfulness. And this one is also a buzzword that you might have heard of. But mindfulness is a non-judgmental mind state in which you observe your thoughts and feelings as they are, without judgment, without trying to suppress or deny them. But at the same time, mindfulness requires that we don't over-identify with thoughts and feelings, so that we can avoid being caught up and swept away by the negative reactivity that might happen through cognitive distortion. But some of you might be thinking, will too much self-compassion undermine my motivation? So will I become self-indulgent and not do anything if I just allow it to happen when it happens? Well, the research actually shows that no. Self-compassion is strongly associated with an increased intrinsic motivation that comes from within, and the desire for the health and the well-being of the self. So actually leading to a heightened personal initiative to make changes in one's life, behavior changes and all of that. It becomes a little bit easier when we can forgive ourselves and try again the next day. All that is to say, I think belittling ourselves into behavior change, it doesn't work over the long run. Like, we keep kind of slamming our heads against it over and over and over again, trying to force change, and it just really isn't gonna work. Over-identifying with critical judgments actually can reinforce cognitive distortion and exacerbate the poor outcomes of low self-efficacy. Extreme programs that prioritize fast results over the health and longevity of the body are only going to leave us overly fatigued, possibly injured, and wondering why fitness has to be so hard. But it doesn't have to be. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to share with you all a gentler and kinder way to approach the lifelong practice that is physical fitness. And I hope that everyone can take just a little bit of what I've shared with you tonight that works for you and apply it toward reaching a place of peace and joy in your movement journey. Thank you.
Oh, don't go anywhere. Where are you going? Q&A. Time for questions.
I'm in the hot seat.
Okay. Well, who has the first question for Vianca? Okay.
Great job, Vianca.
First
of all,
you.
What is the workout that involves being on a giant snail?
Oh, that's the Kindness Goblin
I have another question.
50-day program.
Okay.
Where, yeah, you learn to be a little more cottagecore.
Nice.
And like release the highly driven sort of nature of capitalistic consumerism. Nice. Yeah, that one.
My real question was around the 10,000 steps. Where does that come from, and is there actually any validity to that you're supposed to get 10,000 steps a day?
What? No, I guess does that relate it in your mind to the recommended, like the Fitbit's telling you to get 10,000 steps a day in order to achieve your like health goals? Oh, right. So actually that figure of the recommended steps per day is arbitrary, and they just came up with that as a marketing device to sell watches. So it's not really as important to, I guess, get a certain amount of steps per day, but for some people, quantifying it in that way can help them stay a little bit more consistent in trying to get more activity. So, you know, if it works for you for whatever reason, I say go for it. The quote that I said, I'm not sure. I've heard that so much over my life that I really don't know where it came from. I just kind of ad-libbed that one.
So speaking of Fitbits or smartwatches, if we do have something that is like telling us, you know, your resting heart rate or something like, is there any like useful way to use that information, like in terms of a fitness journey, or is it just like a cool thing that you can like?
I missed the last part of your question. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, sure. So, yeah, resting heart rate is a really good metric just to have an understanding of what your kind of like basic heart status is when you're at rest. But the one that I like to kind of look at a little bit more is using the resting heart rate to actually find out what your ideal heart rate should be during a moderate intensity cardiorespiratory training session, because it can actually vary depending on what your resting heart rate is. So if you have that information, that's a really good piece of info to have to sort of get a baseline of where you're at so that you can see, okay, is this program going to be achievable for me and you know, safe even. So it's a really good piece of information to have. But if your watch also has heart rate max, that's an even more helpful one to kind of help you see like where you should be in those training sessions.
Cool. I have a follow-up.
Okay.
What other metrics like that are helpful?
So I will say that those two are pertaining mostly to cardiorespiratory exercise, which is like awesome, you know, and really getting the 150 minutes per week is going to give you all of the major improvements to your health markers. So that's what I'll say about that. But other evaluations and assessments that might be necessary at first that could sort of, you know, be a useful thing to have a professional's opinion on are movement assessments and sort of ratings of your perceived exertion during exercise, because it's going to help determine, again, what is a reasonable place for me to be starting out, especially if I'm coming back after a break, or if I've just not really been seeing a lot of ability to be consistent with more intense programming.
And for those setting those baselines, that requires help of a professional like yourself?
Right, it's something that I hesitate to tell everyone to do as much research and stuff as I did for it to be something that I'm comfortable doing, and of course the certification helps. If you're nerdy enough, you could figure it out on your own, but it is something that it's much easier to get somebody who's used to looking at, you know, movement and movement patterns, especially in beginner exercisers, to sort of evaluate where you are and see if anything needs to be addressed before moving on to more intense exercise.
All right, next question. Okay, yeah, all three of you.
Oh, weird. Stretching. People say, I've had so many different people say, it's not important to stretch before exercise as much as it is after, or it's most important one way or the other. What's the truth?
What's the deal with stretching? Okay. So yes, there are different schools of thought on this, and one of the things that you may have heard is if you stretch before exercising, that it could increase your risk of injury or decrease your strength production capabilities. So there is a sort of a grain of truth to that, but it's only if you go over a certain length of time actually holding a static stretch. So static stretching is where you're completely holding the position for at least 30 seconds to like a minute or 2 minutes. So if you keep it to more dynamic stretching, you can definitely stretch at the beginning, and it actually does improve your range of motion. It brings blood flow to your muscles and stuff like that. So dynamic stretching over static stretching at the beginning of a workout, but at the end, more focus on static stretching is useful. That one's, yeah, I've heard a lot of people just be confused about that, so.
Great job. I wanted to know what some of your favorite movements are and why.
So some of my favorite movements, when referring to strength training in specific, okay. I really love functional movements that are going to improve my ability to do things in everyday life. So whether it be, you know, being able to squat and not worry that my knees are going to give out on me, or pick something up off the floor in a correct manner using my glutes so that I don't strain my back. Those are going to be my most favorite because they just give me that extra protective measure in my day-to-day activity so that I can have confidence that I'm not going to get hurt again, because that has actually happened to me several times in the past, and I've had to rehabilitate knee injuries and back injuries on my own. That's partially what got me interested and motivated enough to complete the certification. But yeah, functional training that's going to be applicable in the activities of daily living that we might need to do.
Great talk.
Thank you.
So I'm curious about your thoughts, and I really, appreciate your approach and advice. I'm curious your thoughts on why it seems there is a substantial minority of people who, even though we have so much cognitive science at this point that says motivation via cruelty does not work on people, why there's a lot of people who seem convinced that it does, and that you're somehow coddling people in their bad behaviors or bad health if you don't call them out.
Right. So I think I'm not speaking as a certified personal trainer through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. It's just Vianca up here now. So I really think the answer here lies in like money. That's where the money is. Because people have that preconceived notion of, oh, if I'm gonna see a personal trainer, I want them to put me through it, you know? Sort of reinforcing those old ideas that they were, you know, we've all been fed that for a very long time. So what are they gonna do? They're gonna give the client whatever they want, which is probably aggressive, complete transformation in 3 months. They're gonna promise all of these really fantastical things and then pretty much count on you to stop going or to just do the 3 months that you signed up for, and that's it. So yeah, that's the easy answer for most things is, where's the money?
Yeah, we hear that a lot at Nerd Night. There's always a question, and the answer is because of money. All right, I believe that is all the time we have for questions. Thank you one more time, Vianca.
Great,
Another
thank you
round of
so much, y'all.
applause. Yay!